Hello, my name is Aaron Hathaway. I'm a technical services manager with Anew Farm. I'm here to talk to you about Anew EZ, our new formulation of Anew, and its use in cool season turf. Below you kind of see a chart of some of the different species that you might encounter, at least in northern regions of the United States or in other countries as well. Bent grass, obviously a very ubiquitous turf grass in northern regions, greens, fairways, it's kind of split up. And really these rate recommendations, you see that for Anew bluegrass and bent grass, it doesn't change when you go from greens to fairways. And so those are the same, the recommendations of where to begin, on bent grass, starting at 9 fluid ounces per acre is a good place to start. And then you can start to increase those rates as you see fit or as you want more regulation. On Anew bluegrass, you see that the rates are a little bit lower. And that's because Anew is a very strong regulator of Anew bluegrass. And so if you have 50% or more of Anew bluegrass, you're not looking to really reduce that stand. These are rates that you can begin on. And I'll talk later in another module about how you can actually use Anew to start to reduce the amount of POA or Anew bluegrass in your bent grass fairways and greens as well. And then for Kentucky bluegrass, ryegrass, fescues, whether this is fairway, athletic height, or lawn height, there are different, again, recommendations of kind of just where to begin for those rates. Anew EZ on cool season turf. I'm going to talk about kind of a couple strengths of Anew EZ. We're going to talk about use in bent grass putting greens versus Trinex Pec Ethyl or Primo Max. We'll talk about how you can get better suppression of Anew bluegrass. And as you get better suppression of Anew bluegrass especially versus Trinex Pec Ethyl, you can start to more evenly regulate fairways and greens and begin to regulate those turfgrass species at a similar level so that you're not having one grow faster than another and having more clippings because there's more than one turfgrass species within that stand. And then we'll talk about kind of a niche use of Anew EZ, which is bent grass greens with Bermuda grass surrounds and why that makes sense as well. So over the years, there's been a ton of research kind of looking at this reapplication interval. And all we're talking about here is how often do you need to come back and reapply these PGRs? The whole goal of a plant growth regulator is to regulate growth of a turf grass stand, whether, again, it's a fairway or a green or a lawn, is to regulate that growth into perpetuity. In a perfect world, you'd make one application and you'd regulate that growth forever. We don't live in a perfect world. And these PGRs actually get broken down over time by the plants themselves. They get metabolized into other metabolites. And so as the plants break these down, you have to reapply these PGRs to get back into the plant and start doing the job of growth regulation again. And so research has shown that not all PGRs are created equal. And it even changes from one plant species to the next. So might be different on bent grass than it is Anew bluegrass. And so over time, we've begun to build our library of reapplication intervals. As a general rule, these reapplication intervals are important because as it warms up, plants metabolize these PGRs more quickly than they do when it's cooler. So in the shoulders of the season, in the spring or in the fall when it's cooler, turfgrass plants will metabolize the PGRs, but much more slowly than in the heat of the summer. So that's why we use these growing degree days, and you can look up more information about them. But in the end, sometimes superintendents think it's easier just to reapply on a very regular basis, whether that's weekly or bi-weekly, and so we'll talk about that. But you can see that prohexadione calcium, or Anew EZ in this case, is going to get you about 280 growing degree days, where Trinex Pec Ethyl is going to get you a little bit lower, 230 growing degree days. That's basically you make an application and then your growing degree days begin to accumulate. And once you hit 230 growing degree days, you're going to reapply Trinex Pec Ethyl to keep that plant under regulation. And you're going to reapply prohexadione calcium at 280. And you may have heard it said that if you're not going to keep those turfgrass species in regulation, it's not worth applying the PGR in the first place. So these are important to some degree because all the benefits we get from PGRs are while they're actually under regulation. Because we don't lose all that energy that that goes into vertical growth, we can actually partition that energy to other plant processes, which is really a huge strength of these PGRs. So to illustrate this difference in reapplication interval between Anew EZ, so Anew EZ at 9 fluid ounces per acre, and Anew EZ at 18 fluid ounces per acre. Those are the two Anew EZ treatments in this trial. And this trial was done at Michigan State University on a bent grass putting green. And then Primo Max applied at 6 fluid ounces per acre, which is a very common rate, and 12 ounces per acre. And all we're looking at here is dry weight in grams. And so how we measure this growth rate is we apply these treatments as we did in this case, and each of these plots gets mowed separately. These clippings from each separate plot get collected, they get dried, and then they get weighed. And so all we're looking at is those weights from these different treatments. And so we're looking at two different dates, June 19th, which is 13 days after the previous application, and then July 3rd, which is 14 days after the application. You can see that on June 19th versus the untreated, this is the light green bar, each treatment is providing some suppression. You see that the letters show that they're even statistically significant in their ability to reduce the growth of these this turf stand. So whether it was Anew at 4 and 8 ounces or 9 and 18 fluid ounces of Anew EZ, or Primo at 6 and 12 fluid ounces, everything is giving some growth regulation. You also see that if you increase the rate, you get more growth regulation, whichever PGR you're using. If you look at the July 3rd, and remember I mentioned to you that as temperatures warm up, these plants metabolize the PGRs more quickly. And so July is probably hotter than it was in June, and you can see this is 14 days after the application. So the dark green Anew EZ at 9 fluid ounces per acre, still providing good regulation 14 days after the application. It's really what you want because it's in the heat of the summer where you can start to see these PGRs get broken down by the plants so quickly that you can start to come out of that regulation before a 2-week period goes by. Same thing at 18 ounces, fluid ounces per acre, still providing good suppression. But you see Primo Max at 6, it's statistically not different from the untreated plots. And so we're starting to lose some of that regulation 14 days after the treatment. And then even at the 12 ounce rate, it is different from the untreated, but the Anew treatments are providing better suppression of bent grass on this putting green than even Primo Max at 12 ounces per acre. So this kind of illustrates, I like this graph because it illustrates how Anew can get you much closer to that 14-day interval. The growing degree days that I showed you, 230 for Primo, 280 for Anew, 230 in the heat of the summer in a place like Michigan might get you 11 days in July and August. And for Anew, it's commonly going to get you 2 extra days. So it doesn't always get you to that 14-day mark or that two week mark, but it gets you closer. And so the chances that you're going to go into this rebound or get back to what the untreated was giving you is much less with Anew because you're getting a little bit more time from it. This is just, a picture is worth 1,000 words sometimes, and this picture kind of shows that, if you treat a fairway with Anew EZ on the left side, this is again a golf course in Michigan, so you can be sure there's some Anew bluegrass with this bent grass, but on the left side, very little to clean up. Where Anew EZ was applied on the right side, there's a ton to clean up, lots of loose clippings. So often you'll see a superintendent come through with a buffalo blower or something, but Anew is a very, very good regulator of Anew bluegrass, especially versus Trinexpec ethyl, which is not as good at regulating Anew bluegrass as it is bent grass. But Anew will provide much more even regulation of both species, and people tend to notice that on their fairways when they do have often a mixed stand of Anew bluegrass and bent grass. And then I mentioned the use of Anew on on bent grass greens with Bermuda grass collars and or surrounds. The reason this makes sense is because, as I showed you, Anew is a very strong regulator of bent grass. It's also a strong regulator of Anew bluegrass. So if there was Anew bluegrass in this green also, it would regulate it very strongly. And it's going to last a long time. So you can reduce your rates, you don't have to apply as often, and therefore in the taller turf grass, in the surrounds or the collars or both, where especially in the shoulders of the season, where the potential of growth is decreased of the Bermuda grass in the shoulders of the season because of the cool temperatures. It's a warm season grass and cool temperatures. It's a higher cut turf, so growth potential is less to begin with on that higher cut turf than it would be if it was cut lower. The potential to over-regulate this collar or these surrounds with the PGR is there because of all those things. It's a warm season grass in the shoulders of the season. It's higher cut to begin with, and then as you overspray, you can just begin to over-regulate all these surrounds, especially when it's Bermuda grass that's surrounding a bent grass putting green. Anew is just a really nice fit here because you can use those lower rates, really get the benefit from Anew's strong regulation on bent grass, and it's actually a little softer on Bermuda grass. So as you come out from that green into the collars and surrounds, you're not going to affect that Bermuda grass as much as you would with something like Trinex Peckheffel. Thanks for listening to the Anew EZ educational module on cool season turf grass. If you ever have any further questions, feel free to shoot me an email at aaron.hathaway@newfarm.com.